Hello, everyone. Just waiting for Robin to join in these spaces. I'm hoping to discuss everything blockchain related. No specific coins in question, but I'm hoping that conversations that I have with other individuals um, turn into fruitful. Robin, thank you for joining. Can you confirm that you can speak?
I hope I can speak and I hear you perfectly fine. Hi, Amen.
Hey, thank you for confirming, and thank you for, of course, taking the time to talk to me about a variety of questions that I had. And this is the first ever spaces that I'm motivated me was your post on X, where you mentioned that you took the risk and you started your channel and you didn't exactly know like how it was going to pan out, and you accomplished your milestone of 10,000 subscribers, so congratulations on that. I do want to say that for me, my intention here isn't really to grow an audience or anything, but it's mainly very similar to the intention behind your channel as well, which is spread the good word of blockchain technology and Bitcoin. And I want to use spaces as a way to increase my own knowledge. And as a result, I'm hoping that anyone else who listens in gets to take something away from these conversations as well. Time to speak to me about Bitcoin and everything else that we're gonna discuss. Um, Before I butcher your name for the rest of the conversation, could you pronounce it, your first and last name, for me and future audiences?
Yeah, most say like zero or something like that, but I mean Robin. I think is quite easy to pronounce. I think there are a lot of Robins that are famous in the movies and stuff like that. So I think Robin is quite known how to pronounce it. The
Yeah.
last one is like Saya.
Okay.
I do it like that. Even for like Austrians, it's not that common of a name. But yeah, it's Saya and not Zero, but it's fine anyways. And I prefer Robin. So
Awesome.
let's stay with let's stick with Robin.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thank you, Robin. All right. So I guess with that, we can probably jump into some of the questions that I had for you. And I want this to be informal. So at any point, if I'm asking questions that you're not comfortable with, just let me know that, hey, this is not something that I've publicly disclosed. And at the same time, if there's any questions that you have at any point, if you would need clarification in terms of why I'm asking, feel free to just let me know. So I wanted to start with, of course, I'm a consumer of your YouTube content as well. I feel like we get to know a version of a person through the videos that we watch and the questions that people ask. And but I don't think I ever came across like an introduction video of yourself. So if you did have to introduce or summarize, who you are as a person, um, in maybe three words or three separate sentences, how would you describe yourself?
That's too that kind of a video I should probably do when background is and stuff like that. I try to give some small hints along the way along the podcast. So I think like people that listen to my podcast for a long time already, they probably know some facts like, oh, I've always been quite sporty. I've been in stocks basically since I am able to be in stocks, and then I got out of stocks because of Bitcoin, and I focused solely and only on Bitcoin since like almost 4 years now, and that's kind of what describes me the best. I think I'm just like trying to figure out what to do with finances. Did everything I could with like savings, with stocks, with everything that I can, and kind of ended up with Bitcoin, and that's my sole focus since the last 4 years. Years as I committed to a daily Bitcoin podcast for the next 10 years till 2034, probably 2035 is a better number. And let's see what I do from there onwards.
So I appreciate you for taking the time to interview such interesting personalities and producing content for everyone else out there to learn. Um, I guess a perfect segue. You mentioned that you were always into investment and stocks, and you discovered your journey of how you discovered it. And so not just in terms of how you came across it, but also your early impressions. Like what did you think about the technology when you first saw it? Versus like how did you get to a point where you actually started investing in Bitcoin yourself? And if it was Bitcoin that brought you in, feel free to mention about that. If it was any other altcoins that brought you in, feel free to mention that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Definitely, it was Bitcoin. I started with Bitcoin only, but before I even came into Bitcoin, I was completely into stocks. And the funny thing is, I thought for 3 years straight that Bitcoin is a scam. And I think a lot of people actually do think that Bitcoin is a scam at first, or do think that Bitcoin is something that most people that are outside of Bitcoin and just like starting to learn a little bit about it, they hear it in the news, they hear it in mainstream media, and then they have those things where like, oh, I don't know, does it use too much electricity? Is it maybe a scam? Maybe it's as a pyramid scheme? Where's this all this money coming from? Like, what purpose does it fulfill? Because most people say like, yeah, I have money, I have the euro, I have the dollar, and most people don't even see the problem with that. So I think that's where a lot of the confusion first comes in, and that confusion I had for 3 years straight. I thought that's a scam because I was a stock pro. I was like, I don't invest in a asset that has no cash flow. Like, how do I even start? A lot of people that are in traditional finance right now make that same very mistake. They're like, oh, like it has no cash flow, it has no PE ratio. What do I do with that? And that's where I came from. Till someone actually asked me a lot of questions about it. And I was popular in my small town for picking stocks, and I even gave some small talks about it and presentations about it. So I was really deep into that stock rabbit hole, and it was maybe also good in it. At least like the results gave were quite good in it. But I think I had more luck than I actually was good in it. But people were asking me, hey, what do you think about that Bitcoin thing, especially like in the beginning of 2020? And at some point, I was just discovering that I don't have enough arguments against it, and I wanted to prove to the other people that Bitcoin is actually a scam. I wanted to prove that I'm right, that Bitcoin is a scam. In trying to prove that, I discovered that Bitcoin might not be a scam, it might be something interesting, and that's how I came into Bitcoin and how I came into that whole thing. And it was a fun thing to come into Bitcoin, thinking it's a stock, thinking it's a scam, and just 3 days later, I was like, oh, okay, it's not a scam, and it's just like a few years later, and I think like, oh, it will go to 50 million. Oh, I think it will be the base money that we will use at any given time, and all those crazy theories that I have right now, and that journey that I have been into Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's very interesting people first react to Bitcoin and blockchain technologies in terms of like, well, why is this needed? This I've heard that it's a scam. I've heard such and such person lost this much money. And so people always approach it from a very fearful way, which an argument could be made that perhaps that is the right way to approach it, because if you share your seed phrases and treat it like it's nothing, as we've learned through other people's lessons. But also, it's very interesting how people go from disbelievers to believers into advocates, right? Which I think you're a prime example of. If you're open to sharing, because I think it's a very interesting fact, most people that I've often heard talk about Bitcoin and how they adopted Bitcoin in terms of acquiring as an asset to begin with. I always thought like, okay, these are the OGs. This is probably the 2011, 2012 crowd. But I've also come to realize and learn that most of the people that are, I guess, Bitcoin advocates still somewhat recently discovered Bitcoin, and of course, recency is it's relative. So, if you can speak to what sort of time frame did you actually come across Bitcoin, I think that that helps others understand that, okay, just because you didn't get it at $10 doesn't mean that you can no longer get Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's the thing where no matter when you come into Bitcoin, you think you are late. There's those amazing tweets from people in 2011, 2012, where Bitcoin was like a few bucks, or maybe even a few $100 in 2013, and they're like, "Oh shit, I missed the train," or "Shit, I'm late to the game." Uh, but it was never true, because it's never too late to opt in the best money ever. Of course, if you opt in all your financial energy in 2013 into Bitcoin, it's better than when you do it in 2024. But it is better to do it in 2024 than in 2025 or in 2035. So um, early is always better with adopting such a new technology. But when you're early, you also have other risks. For example, a lot of the OGs that you're talking about in 2012, they made some massive mistakes with Bitcoin, and a lot of them lost right now in their wallet, because they sold it too early and then was not able to buy it back, or they lost the hardware wallet because they didn't take it seriously because Bitcoin was just €2, or anything like that. There's so many mistakes, or you just had it on an exchange. The exchange got broke. That we had that story over and over and over again. So I think there's a lot of nuance to that. So just because someone is maybe since in Bitcoin since 2000, I don't know, 12, 13, or 15, doesn't mean he has more Bitcoin than you. It just means that he is in there since a long time along the way. There are people, of course, that didn't do the mistakes. I personally went into, and that's publicly known, that I went into Bitcoin since 2020, and I didn't took it seriously till 2021. So there, I really went heavily into Bitcoin, and also started talking about it in 2020. They invested, but I think we are never too late, and I think we should really focus on, like, where are we going in Bitcoin? Like, what is the target? Where is the full potential of Bitcoin? And to be honest, there is no real full potential of Bitcoin, because if it becomes money, it will always expand with the productivity of humankind. So when we expand humankind, when we get more efficient in doing something, or we observe another planet or something like that, then we are expanding the market capitalization, if you so will, of Bitcoin. So if you think about Bitcoin's full potential, it's actually infinity, even though there's a ceiling, of course, but the ceiling is always raising to a certain extent. And that's the really interesting part about Bitcoin and all the price models. They are all right. No matter what price you put on Bitcoin, at some point in time, we will reach that point. It's just like the price prediction where you put on a time and a year to it. That's where it usually gets fishy, at least for me. When someone asks me, because I know some stock pros that ask me, "Oh, what's the full potential of Bitcoin?" I usually try to make him understand what Bitcoin actually is and what Bitcoin actually tries to solve. And then we know, okay, what is the size of the problem that we have? And I think the size of the problem is quite big. We have a massive problem with storing our wealth. Then there are different numbers out there. There's like it's number of 400 trillion, number of 900 trillion. There are those different numbers out there that we think of, like, do what is the whole problem worth of securing your financial energy? And that's just a huge number. And then the question is, like, oh, how much of that number Bitcoin can actually subsume? And then how many Bitcoin will be there? Because maybe it's not 21 million, maybe it's just 15 million. Then we can also get in the discussion. Maybe at some point we will get to old Bitcoin, but that's very technical, and I'm not technical expert, so that's probably not good road to go down. So the thing that I then try to make people of, let's say, 900 trillion, and Bitcoin only captures like a few percent of that. That's already way bigger than it is now, and it also already has a way bigger market cap. But then if we go where it really gets fun, then when we go to the place of the bull case of, like, okay, of this 900 trillion, what can Bitcoin maximum reach. That's like 85% in my opinion. It's like I researched a lot. I interviewed already so many people, and that's like where I think in my opinion right now. And then we come to this crazy price targets of like 50 million euros per Bitcoin in today's dollars terms without inflation. That's where I see those. The first thing that I said about that topic, I think, is the real thing. There is no real ceiling, as it's always moving up a little bit. And yeah, I went up on a on a tangent here and a little bit of a rant. So sorry, I even
No,
forgot the initial question.
no, no worries. It was just about understanding like what time frame you entered in and essentially making a strong case for that it's never too late. So I think I want to walk away with a statement from what I've learned from you is um better late than never, right? So I think it's an asset class that you can opt into um at any point whenever you're ready. And this is Michael Saylor is known for saying like Bitcoin, you get Bitcoin for the price you deserve. It's a little harsh way of saying it, but essentially it's like, hey, whenever economics and how money works and everything else, then you start believing or understanding Bitcoin properly. So the other thing I actually learned from what you just said is most people, at least in my case, when I was doing stocks and trading, I wasn't really focused on the macro picture. I was just like, okay, I can buy this stock, it goes up in value, I sell it, and I get to eat off of it, or I get to hedge against inflation. Like those were just the two things. However, once you look into Bitcoin as an alternative asset that you can also, trade with or hedge against inflation with, you realize that it's actually, the global financial um, assets in many ways. I guess more on that later. Robin, one quick question. So for anyone else who's listening, comment section, please continue to do so, and we can go through some questions. But also, Robin, is there a time crunch that we're working with today, just so that I can be respectful and mindful of that?
Oh no, no, like we have at least like 1 hour, 1.5 hours. I
Awesome.
think I have my next podcast in like a little bit over 1.5 hours. So like no time constraints at that time. By the way, I
Awesome.
also want
All
to
right.
mention one
Yeah.
thing where I thought about that we kind of have this weird thing when we are in Bitcoin Twitter, when we are in YouTube, what social media feed bubble. We think that so many people already understand Bitcoin, so many people already talk about Bitcoin, especially when we also go to those big conferences where like 10,000 people are there or something like that. Will be fun also next week in Amsterdam. But the truth is, nobody has Bitcoin till now. We are so freaking early. If you just have to go down the streets and ask like 20 people, hey, what is Bitcoin and what does Bitcoin try to solve? On that question on that day. It's like so sometimes I think we have to step out of that digital bubble that we are in and just go in the real world, go ask your far away aunt that you saw once a year and ask her about the opinion on Bitcoin. Ask the people that have never interacted online with that Bitcoin Twitter bubble. It's something really. It gives you this zen feeling of like, oh, we are really early and we have a lot of time. So I think that's a great thing. I just wanted to add that.
No, thank you for adding that. And I think that's precisely why I was struggling last night with what do I call these spaces. I started asking my mom and my wife, who obviously know that that I talk nothing other than about Bitcoin. So I'm like, okay, I want this to be a place where people can talk, and through discussions, we can, share our ideas, share our concerns, and then hopefully learn just one thing. And if we get to learn one thing, then that's one step closer to improving our financial future. And so I was lucky enough that I think the wordplay on the conversation and coinversation was spot on. But then I was struggling with the tagline, and I'm like, what do I call this? And then ultimately I concluded with a chain of thoughts, similar to a train of thoughts, but the wordplay on blockchain. And so yeah, I'm hoping that when people get to ask their questions, they're able to clarify the things that they don't understand. And sometimes like all you need is being wanted to again appreciate you for taking the time to speak to me and everyone else today. All right, so let's get into so I wanna so you talked about how you discovered Bitcoin and how you got into it. What has been your best experience in Web3 so far? And so I'm using the word Web3 cautiously because sometimes you go into dabble in the other one and there's hypes and where it's very hard to I guess avoid the distraction where there's like NFTs popping up and DeFi and whatnot, but yet we all make mistakes and we all have like good fun stories to tell. So I wanted to open the floor for you to say, okay, what's been your best experience in Web3 so far, and also your worst.
Um, for me, Web3 is connected with altcoins, and altcoins for me are, let's call it as it is. For me, altcoins are shitcoins. So, um, for me, the best experience in Web3 and in DeFi is only Bitcoin, because when you think about the word DeFi, it's often connected with an altcoin that is actually controlled centrally. And I'm like, okay, when when we have a centrally controlled altcoin that calls himself, or the organization calls himself DeFi, that that seems to be a scam, because they are delivering marketing that is just not right. Like, you, marketing is good if you make a product that is good, awesome, but it's not good if you have an apple and you sell it as a banana. So like, that's what really bothers me with the whole altcoin and not Bitcoin space and crypto space and Web3 space. So Web3 is for me just another word. The best experience with DeFi is Bitcoin. Like that's for me the only DeFi there is right now. And I don't think it's possible to ever get a second DeFi protocol. Maybe in 100 years, maybe in 1,000 years, maybe when aliens come down and they have a better chain than us. I don't know. I don't see it right now happening. But that's basically my answer of like, Bitcoin is the best DeFi web hosting things that happen on Bitcoin, with ordinals and all those things. I personally not the biggest fan of that, but I'm also a big fan of free markets. And if the Bitcoin chain allows for that, you can do with your Bitcoin whatever you want, and you can pay the transaction fee for whatever you want. And Bitcoin will be stronger than that and will not be taken down by memes or by anything of that. And that's kind of how I see. To clarify once again, in Web3, crypto is for me Bitcoin. I have been dabbling, like when I started in Bitcoin in 2020, 2021, with some coins, and the experience was the same it is now. They have a great marketing, because when they don't have a great marketing, they don't have anything. And then you get in, and then you're like, oh, okay, there's just like three guys behind that have a great roadmap, a great marketing, but at the end of the day, they just could do the same thing on a normal database. I don't know why we need to have everything on blockchain all of a sudden. I mean, the trend is slowly getting on the other side again. I think blockchain is not that trendy and hype anymore. I think that was like a few years ago, way worse, at least from my understanding. But maybe that's just the Bitcoin bubble of actually what I learned in school. And blockchain is just a very inefficient way use case of Bitcoin. If you want to have a video game which is centrally controlled on a blockchain, it's better if you centrally control that video game on a better database. So that's how I kind of see that thing. Also, one more thing that I want to add here is always the Oracle problem. I think we cannot mention it um, often enough. When we put something on the blockchain that it's not natively on the blockchain, like Bitcoin, we always blockchain, but who's the the organization that puts it there. Like, why do we trust that organization to put it there? There's this thought of, I think, what was it, WeChain or something like that, where we like,
Hmm.
let's put all the, I forgot the word for that in English, but it's basically you want to track the bananas, you want to track any yogurt, and then we put on every stage we put something on there. But you still have to trust the organization to put it on there. So just my small tangent on on, on Web
Yeah,
three and
no,
crypto.
thanks for that. And I think speaking of bananas, we will get to our banana zone conversation soon. Um, so I was hoping to kind of understand if you made from it looks like dabbling with shitcoins was it. Any do's and don'ts that you self now from your mistakes and from your best experiences so far?
Yes, there are a few. The first of all, when we have Bitcoin and we really want to get more Bitcoin, we sometimes get into this thing of like, we want to have now so much more Bitcoin, and then all of a sudden we get in this leverage game. And leverage on Bitcoin can be something that is really beneficial for you, but you have to know exactly what you're doing. And the hard truth is that most don't know what they're doing, and most will burn themselves if they have any kind of leverage or any kind of credit against your Bitcoin, even though that can be a very good strategy. But that's something you really have to look in the details. So I personally, if anyone asks me, oh, should I get a credit on Bitcoin? I usually just like say no, because those people who actually know what they're doing with credits, they are usually not the people that ask. they, they usually know that good, and they usually don't ask. That's one thing that you should not do. The other thing is trying to time the market. There's a lot of now with the power law, a lot of tools out there that are like, okay, let's exactly buy there in because that metric and that metric and that metric is telling you so. And if you're in for a very long time, maybe you have a better feeling where the Bitcoin price is now. But honestly, most people are better off just setting up a weekly or monthly DCA plan and just DCA all the way. Like that's for 99% of the world, probably the best way to do it. And there's no need to time the market. Bitcoin is such an fast appreciating asset. It's the fastest horse, anyways, in the whole in the whole zoo. So why put any risk on there? Why put any risk with leverage on there? Why put any risk with timing it on there? Just invest the money or like save the money in Bitcoin that you have. So that's I think the two most. The other one, or I almost forgot the most important rule of Bitcoin. Bitcoin in self custody, it's just not Bitcoin. It's you want to collect your Bitcoin till it's enough of UTXO, but that's a whole nother discussion. And now till you can really get it into your single sig or multi sig solution. But self custody is just a must, and I would encourage anyone, but probably here not people that don't have self custody. But if there is someone with no self custody, just think of like, let's try this out. Like I bought my first hardware wallet in actually in the first week where I got Bitcoin, not because I understood that it is important, but because I was very curious about the technology. And that's what I also try to encourage everyone that is not in self custody right now. Try it out, figure it out, play around with it. And if it self custody isn't something for you, which it should be, like it should be something for you, at least play with the tech, at least like find out like what's going on with self custody. And yes, if you maybe have MicroStrategy stocks or maybe have a Bitcoin ETF, don't rely completely on your Bitcoin ETF, don't rely completely on a MicroStrategy stock. Have some Bitcoin in self custody. Best case, if you have all your Bitcoin in self custody, but have as much Bitcoin as possible in self custody.
Dude, dropping golden nuggets here. As I super timely because the other day I was like, do I take a loan against my house and buy my wife and my kid? And I'm like, yeah, probably not a good idea to take that much leverage. But it precisely, if you have to ask, not familiar with the risks involved, so definitely do your own research. And obviously, hashtag not financial advice in this spaces whatsoever, but also hoping that you learn from everyone's decisions here. Sweet, Robin. Wanted to dive into a little bit for your YouTube journey. So what was your decision? I guess you already answered your decision for not remaining anonymous or pseudonymous as you embarked on your podcast.
into it because I was from a very early age on social media with like 15 years old, and I made stock content in German. And I kind of already had my name out there, and I was already known that I hold Bitcoin in some extent, even though it was German, not English. And then when I started the podcast, I thought about that and thought about, okay, there are two roads now that I can go down to. The one road is completely anonymous. I delete everything that I can delete from the internet. Back then, still possible. Right now, it would be probably almost impossible to delete everything because there's also a lot of content on other channels. And the other road was let's just go full on in, like with video, with my face, with my full name, with everything that I have. And I basically made the decision to be one of the digital soldiers for Bitcoin, to be one of the Bitcoin fighters, the freedom fighters that are with their real face and their real name out there. And I respect 100% if someone chooses to not do that. I already had a lot of people on my show that didn't had their face revealed or their name revealed. Maybe even like with distorted voice. I don't know, but probably not. That's I think the way to go. Like respect everyone's decision if they want to be anonymous or not. But I think we need some people that are out there with their face and known for being a Bitcoiners, because you want people to relate to a person, and we learn through that. I had yesterday a discussion that there isn't a real good Bitcoin movie out there. I mean, there's Matrix, there is Truman Show, there's In Time, there are all those amazing movies. Bit as a Bitcoiner, you kind of see them as Bitcoin movies. Um, but all the other movies are kind of documentaries. They are very factual. There's not that one amazing, great story about a person and very emotional that is not in Bitcoin. Like you can give it to your sister. Your sister is not in. Your sister might not enjoy a Bitcoin documentary because it's very factual. It's a lot of numbers. There's a lot of the monetary system. This is how it works. This is we should also move to more that because this is where we really get the masses to pay attention to Bitcoin, and yeah, that's kind of there's some of my thoughts around being in Bitcoin with my full name, to it, and I want to stand for Bitcoin. Like I have all my money in Bitcoin. I have all my identity in Bitcoin right now. And if Bitcoin goes down, I go down, and that's okay. Like I'm willing to put myself out there and speak for Bitcoin. On the other side, if Bitcoin completely rips off and really goes to the moon, this also is extremely positive, of course, for me because I told worry, and that's kind of the personal branding bet that I took there with YouTube, and I think it will turn out amazing. Of course, I think that because I put everything in there,
Hmm.
and I think every year I like it more and more. The decisions I took there. I mean, the podcast is not even a year old. It's now. It's. I'm still very early in my YouTube game, to be honest.
Yeah, I want to call out one interesting point, just because I've attended my fair share bit of AMAs on all these projects, whether it's DeFi or NFTs and whatnot. There are most of the people out there that are putting content is because they want to profit off of. I shouldn't say most, but let's just say some of the people that are out there putting content out there is because they want to profit off of what they're promoting or what they're shilling. Um, in your example, what I'm picking up is it's reversed. you didn't start a YouTube channel to promote Bitcoin because you had Bitcoin. It looks like you started a YouTube channel because you believed in Bitcoin, regardless of whether you owned Bitcoin or not. And so, of course, the disclosure being that you're all in on Bitcoin, and therefore you do get to profit off of its movement, but you also get to suffer the consequences from its downward momentum. I do transition from, okay, I'm just going to buy some Bitcoin and remain in my own world versus I will be public with this. I will allocate my time and my energy because I know it's a lot. I know it takes a lot of um, energy to promote this cause of Bitcoin. What was that moment for you where you decided that I'm not just going to be a hodler in my own world, but in fact I'm going to go very public with this and continue to bring the world onto Bitcoin?
It was not that one moment, unfortunately, not that one moment that I had a epiphany and all of the sudden went into this. I'm in all in Bitcoin, and this is probably known since 2021. And I started my YouTube channel last year, middle of the year, end of the year, depending on if you take the start date of the YouTube channel or the start date of my actual podcast. And my thinking was when I got into Bitcoin in 2021 full time, I was really satisfied. I was like, "Yeah, that's good, that's great." But then in 2022, I was kind of dissatisfied because there was no real Bitcoiner in my environment. There was just nobody that I really could talk to in my real life about Bitcoin. Then I started going to conferences, local meetups, and I started engaging on Twitter around Bitcoin. And this was only like in 2022. I did not really do anything. I did like once a month, maybe a tweet or something like that. When I really saw like, oh, there are like actually followers coming, there are questions coming, there's something there. And this was like end of 2022, where I had like, I don't know, 200 followers on Twitter. This was not a lot, but it was like, oh, I'm just like shit posting and people actually like it and engage with that. That was like, ah, interesting. I want to do more with that because it was just fun. I had a full time job. Like I woke up at the end of the 2022, starting 2023. I want to really get deeper into the Bitcoin community. Daily Twitter out there, daily tweets out there, five of them. So like 5 daily tweets I put out from 2023 onwards. And this was an to making it really serious. And there in 2023, I don't know, went to 7,000 or something like that. I don't remember exactly where I ended up the last year. But it was an amazing journey because I went deeper into this Bitcoin world, and I was deeper engaged also then in the Bitcoin world. But the whole journey was just like, let's first get into Bitcoin with financial energy, then with your own energy. And it was like a journey into that. It was not like that one moment that all of a sudden click and then I went to full on in Bitcoin. That would have been maybe a better, more of a journey into Bitcoin. And then over time I got into Bitcoin more and more. And yeah, since this year, I think everyone knows that I'm full on completely in Bitcoin. Also, then the decision that was also really big for me in February. If the finances will check out. Now I know it's possible. Now I know that this is actually checking out, and I can actually do the same thing that I did before in my fiat job. Now with my podcast, and that's just a really great place that I am. And it took me around 4 years, channel as I said before, with stocks and with talking about stocks and Bitcoin in German. Started in 2020, and now all of a sudden I can do it full time. But yeah, I have the podcast journey is already 4 years old, so it took me a very long time to figure this out. What I really want to do. I did like news videos once a week. I did like YouTube summaries, 20 minutes long. In German about stocks. Now I kind of ended up, or like not ended up, maybe I do some other things down the road in 10, 20 years. But right now, I'm really in a great place where I can talk about Bitcoin, where I can interview amazing Bitcoiners every day. And that's kind of my commitment right now. And I love to do that.
Hmm. the perfect segue into I've like I said, I've been a consumer of some of your content, and you've definitely interviewed some very interesting personalities. When you're asking people questions, processing whether or not, like, does it make sense to you? What sort of additional homework do you have to do to understand what they were mentioning, and so on and so forth. I'm curious to know what's something that you agree with most of the people going to think exactly the same, right? Some people have different thoughts of the commonality in terms of what's most common between the people that you've interviewed or brought onto your podcast. I totally agree with these fundamentals or these principles, and I apologize if it's going to be repetition in terms of like every other YouTube video that people end up listening to, but I think it's worth emphasizing that what's something common amongst all the speakers that you've spoken to.
I think the most obvious one is that Bitcoin is the most important thing in the world right now. It's like if you, most people that are on my podcast, they are kind of entrenched in Bitcoin to a certain extent, and they dedicated their lives to a certain extent to Bitcoin. And then obviously they have the belief that Bitcoin is right now one of the most important things in the world. Maybe family and other things like health might be more important for most of them, or for all of them. It should be, but it's interesting when we talk about what are common things around my guests, and I think there's one common thing that has all to do or nothing to do with Bitcoin, depending on how you see it. That's ownership. No matter with what guest you speak to, all of them have this concept of like, I want to own my own financial energy, my own financial future, my own health future. This really deep belief, and I want to own my things myself. This concept of ownership, I think that's the main thing that combines all of them. I had some guests on. I remember that one gold guy that I had on that wasn't of the thinking that Bitcoin is the most important thing, but a lot of the things that he said is kind of like, oh yeah, like in heart you are a Bitcoiner, but he isn't there yet. He is also understanding Bitcoin. He has Bitcoin, but he also has gold. So I remember him right now because he falls a little bit out of line of my guests, and there are some others, of course, but most of them all get Bitcoin because that's just like one criteria of mine for the podcast. If they don't get Bitcoin, then they're probably the wrong person to interview on a daily Bitcoin podcast. But the concept of ownership is also a really important one to focus on. And one other thing, maybe that I discussed yesterday that was really interesting. We talked about Bitcoin as the invention of private property. I love that so much because, like, before Bitcoin, you couldn't really own something. Like, everything that you owned, it could have been taken away from you. And I think that's something that we don't talk too much about, but it's this fundamental thing. It's so obvious for Bitcoiners, but if you show this to someone that is not a Bitcoiner outside of our bubble, that they have this like, oh shit, yeah, actually, I don't own my house, I don't own my car. I just have a paper that proves that I have that car and I have that house. But if the man with the gun comes, yeah, it's not not anymore your car and your house. And I think it's a great thing that we have with Bitcoin.
Absolutely. I have to ask the opposite question as well. Into what's something that you disagree with, or are still that you're not fully convinced of, but you're like, okay, but I need to either learn more about this, or I disagree that this is how most of the people are looking at Bitcoin.
Oh man, there's so much. It's fascinating because I actually interview, like as I said, a daily Bitcoin podcast, interview a person every day, and there is probably in every podcast episode something in there that I a little bit disagree with or strongly disagree. Shows, and everyone that is watching my podcast knows I choose curiosity and humbleness over making a debate out of it. Maybe people don't like that style, but I like that style a lot because I want to find out how, like, what he thinks, how he thinks, and why he thinks like that. And sometimes that means I have to not that's wrong because of that, or isn't that wrong because of that. That's just not my podcast. I want to find out how he thinks, why he thinks like that. And that's why also probably in every episode there's a small thing or a big thing. Really rarely it's a big thing, mostly it's a small thing that I disagree with, because when you are a Bitcoiner, you get Bitcoin right now, and we are still so early, most of the things are already aligned. Like most of the thinking, when you are a Bitcoiner, and you're Bitcoin only, and I'm Bitcoin only, and we're all, both Bitcoiners, most of the thinking, the directional thinking, is already aligned. But there might be small differences here and there. I mean, the power law is a famous example right now because it's still discussed so many times. I had from the one side a lot of the people on that were for the power law, and I had now one guy on quickly against it, against the Bitcoin power law. So that's one thing where, like, oh yeah, both sides on, and I just think, like, don't overestimate the power law. So I disagree with both sides actually on that one. So there are probably like 1,000 things I could say, because there's so many small things that come up. But
Yeah.
yeah, power law is just something that popped up now in my head. We disagree on small. One big thing maybe that I just like thought about. Um, a lot of Bitcoiners are very religious about how a Bitcoiner should be. Like a Bitcoiner should eat meat, a Bitcoiner should own a gun, and all those things. These are great things, by the way, but we should not assume that just because you're a Bitcoiner, you have to only eat meat. Because I know some Bitcoiners who actually eat raw vegan all their lives, and they still can be a Bitcoiner. They still can hold Bitcoin and really think deeply about money and have a great opinion about that. But they might disagree on what to eat too, and this has nothing to do with Bitcoin with me. And I think it's funny that that we put our own beliefs on Bitcoin, and then think that everyone else also has to think like that. And I think that's one thing that I'm vocal about, that we should focus on Bitcoin as money, and not Bitcoin, not put all the other things onto Bitcoin.
Right. I'm also looking forward to the documentary that HBO is going to come out with, because I think a part of that they were like, wait, is this a cult? And then they showed a image of Adam Black in a Star Wars suit. So I was like, okay, this should be fun to watch. Sweet. So what's been the most interesting like revelation for you for Bitcoin? I'm assuming it's going to correlate with the ownership, because you emphasize so much on that. Individuals, you get to hear so many different thoughts, and sometimes curiosity is the best way to approach a disagreement, because that's how you get to learn something. So, is there anything in particular that you want to say that like this stood out to you in an interview or from a bunch of interviews that you hadn't previously considered?
Successful people are extremely kind. That's a weird thing. It's not has nothing to do with Bitcoin. It's interesting because I learn a lot about Bitcoin with the Bitcoin podcast. I learn about UTX Bitcoin podcast, which is kind of sad, but it's just the truth. But I also learn a lot about people, and it's interesting that actually the people who have the biggest followings, the most success. One prime example for that is like Jeff Booth. For me, they are the kindest and sweetest and most humble persons ever. It's fascinating to see. They're they're coming 1 minute early in the Riverside studio where I record, and they are apologizing for being late. Like that's the amount of people that are Bitcoin and amazing thing to witness. And I always want to bring new things into discussions, and I think that's something that not too many people talk about. The kindness in Bitcoin is obviously there are also assholes in Bitcoins. Obviously there are toxic people in here, as but most of them, the overwhelming majority, is super kind and super helpful, and that's something amazing about the Bitcoin community. I couldn't wish for a better community to be in, to be honest.
That's absolutely great, and I was not expecting a non-Bitcoin answer for surprising me. All right, switching gears journey here. So switching gears into just and I'm not sure if you know this is the first time you know you. So I'm not sure if these are triggering questions or not. But feel free to say that. Okay, you know what? I don't want to get into these. Starting with the softball, what's like the first tip or word of advice that you would have for anyone who's wanting to learn about Bitcoin? So this is like, hey, I've just heard the name, I don't even know what it means, and because it's a long journey that I would say it's ahead of them, but um, here's what I recommend in terms of how you go about learning Bitcoin for the first time.
I do that quite often. I mean, quite often, depending on where the price is right now. That I have the one thing that I do is telling them, okay, try to buy as really if you talk with a big business amount, if you talk to someone that's 20 years old and just started working, a small amount could be 100 euros or 20 euros even. Just put a small amount in Bitcoin, just so you get the experience of it and just to have some skin in the game, and then start studying. And then you can get them all the Bitcoin books, like the Bitcoin standard that are there. And then you also have to maybe see like what person is that, and recommend the best book. Then I also have some YouTube playlists actually that I concluded from other channels that Orange Pilled Me, that I still recommend to people. Hey, just look at that. That is like fundamental Bitcoin knowledge. You should get into that, and then leave him alone. Like it's a lot of education that he has to do on his own part. Answer all his questions if he has questions, but don't to be a real Bitcoiner. He has to kind of uh, push him in the right direction, but he has to go through the door himself. And that's kind of my approach to it. I try to force people into Bitcoin. It just doesn't work. People people don't want to listen to you if they feel they are forced to it. So if they have interests, they obviously have already some problem they want to solve with Bitcoin. Otherwise, they would not even ask for it. So they have some financial problem that they really want to solve. Then you just have to push them in the right direction, and then they can go down the rabbit hole themselves. But you can always be there for like a guiding partner or whatever you want to be there. But there are first advice: get some skin in the game, because if you never buy anything, you will just lose out and you will not take it seriously. What I sometimes also do is just I have a Lightning wallet with always a few sats on there, and just give them, hey, download this Lightning wallet. I just give you a few sats. That's always an interesting moment, and then you can explain like Lightning wallet, why it's important to scale Bitcoin and all those things. But yeah, just have a conversation with him and ask him what's the problem, and what do you want to solve with Bitcoin, and then from there, individual path, how can you help him.
Hmm. I really hope that one day this conversation gets historicized or referenced in the future as like, oh, look at this person just giving away free sats, similar to like the old days of Bitcoin faucets where they were just dropping you like zero point 0.1 Bitcoin just to understand what it was. Interesting world and interesting times we live in now.
I bought
So,
last time a burger in Austria. It's fascinating for me that in Austria I can already pay in some restaurants and in bars with Bitcoin, but they accept the Bitcoin, and then I cannot. That's just It's just too attractive for me to then buy with Bitcoin when they accept it. And I bought a burger for like 20,000 or 25,000 Satoshi. And I was like, that could be a lot of freaking money one day. That could be a very expensive burger. But at the same time, if I just bought it with euros, it's the same thing. It's like I'm all in Bitcoin anyways. If I buy it now with Satoshis or buy it now with euros, it's basically the same thing. The only one thing that you always have to know about is it is a tax implication, and you probably have to take care of the bookkeeping, and then can be very stressful, or can be very subsuming of your work time. So that's something you definitely have to take care of, or like keep in mind when you buy things with Bitcoin. You don't want to be you bought a burger for a few euros in Bitcoin.
Like, why did you go to jail? Oh, I bought a burger. The things that I'm learning or I'm spending some time and energy to understand better is that, I think I truly believe now that Bitcoin is a multi-purpose asset. And so therefore the taxation laws and things like that have to kind of understand and evolve around it. Um, you know, just like how I mean, I don't think this is a good example, but say you have $1 and you buy something with a dollar, but 5 years later, dollar experiences devaluation, and therefore, if you're spending the dollar again, should you be compensated for the devaluation? Are you suffering some sort of capital gains loss on this? And your taxation laws have evolved to understand that okay, there's the day-to-day use case of an asset or of money, but then there's also large investments and things like that. So I'm still wrapping my head around like what's the Bitcoin that I use for paying for my gas versus what's the Bitcoin that I use for my long-term future. And that's something that I'm learning. So I'm not wanting to preach it at this point, but I found it super relevant in your burger example. I personally think that one of the challenges that Bitcoin is experiencing is, of course, more and more adoption. You currently familiar or using Bitcoin to some capacity, and or it might be 0.01. Don't quote me on this. Um, for Bitcoin to continue to grow, in a way or in a sense, it needs more users. And of course, we're talking about the first advice for people. It's like, hey, just dabble with a little bit of Sats, understand what it is, and at least like put some skin in the game. What's something that you think is the biggest challenge for Bitcoin that it suffers from today? It doesn't have to be like a technical challenge. It could just be, yeah. I'll leave it open ended.
It all comes down in the end, like the question is kind of implying like what are the main drivers for Bitcoin adoption. And I asked actually my community that a few days ago on my YouTube channel, and I kind of gave the options to is it the price, is it the FOMO, the Bitcoin price, a great marketing tool? Is it education? Are all those podcasts, all those that comes from the debasement of the currency? And the truth is, it's all that combined. Like Bitcoin is growing quite rapidly, anyways, right now, and the challenges that we have right now is just like onboarding all those people, having educational platforms where they can actually get a nice education out there, and getting out of that noise. I think there's a lot of noise in that space with crypto, with stocks, with all those big financial YouTube channels that say like, oh yeah, like Bitcoin is crypto and Bitcoin is very speculative. We don't have any regulations around it. Like all those things that are just not true. Um, the, the noise that we have, I think that's one big challenge, and that's why I also encourage everyone to like go out there and speak your mind about Bitcoin. That we have out there for Bitcoin is a good thing. No matter if you put your face out there or not, like that's a great thing for Bitcoin to have, to give a little bit more signal and a little less noise. And it's a very, very, very noisy world out there right now. And you hear a lot about Bitcoin and other things, and it's just like really hard to distinguish. That's why, like, if people really knew where inflation is coming from, if people really knew what the solution to that is, we would already be at Bitcoin, hyper Bitcoinization. So what's stopping people from adopting Bitcoin and being full on in Bitcoin. All those things combined, and one major thing that drives all that home in the end of the day, unfortunately, the best marketing tool. I know it because it's just like the interest of the normies. I know it because when I put the Bitcoin price, more people click on the YouTube thumbnail. It's data, it's proven, it's why people come into Bitcoin in the first place, and then they know, then they learn about the revolution side, the technology, and all the other things. So what we should try to do to the newcomers, that's why I also said before, with the diet and all those things. I think it's not helpful to be to put that out there the first time. Like someone wants to learn about Bitcoin, then they come on Bitcoin Twitter and they're like, "Oh, I have to only eat meat all day long." I don't know if that, that's a good message for people, but definitely then in the deeper conversations, that's maybe a next part to Bitcoin. So it's interesting to think about what's the major challenge for Bitcoin,
Hmm.
because it's just the noise that is this is out there.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to exclude the vegetarians from becoming Bitcoiners. So that's something to consider. All right, so just a heads up for anyone else who's on the call. Robin, and if anyone else has questions, feel free to be ready to just raise your hands or come on as a speaker, ask your questions. And if you're shy from doing that, don't feel free to just add your comments on this spaces, and then I'll ask those for you. Going into some just general, again, hypotheticals, what's the dystopia state? So what's something that kind of keeps you up at night in terms of being concerned that, okay, I really hope this doesn't happen, else like Bitcoin is not from a technical perspective because we understand that it just spins right back up, but yeah, what's the dystopia state? What's something that you're fearful of for Bitcoin?
It's not something that I'm fearful of, but central banks act in a good way, in a budgetary friendly way, and all of a sudden don't spend as much money and don't find excuses and emergency to spend extreme amounts of money and be fiscally responsible, then Bitcoin would not be as fast adopted. At this point, even that, like, even, I think it's not. Like I had yesterday the chat with Base Money, one Base Money on Twitter, and since the last like 100 years with Base Money and the Base Money expansions and inflation, and we basically kind of ended up at the talk like, oh yeah, that trend is not reversible. But even if it would be reversible, even if it would be good to come back down, I think at that point, because we are already so advanced with Bitcoin, the people would not trust it anyways. So that's kind of the the, the, the best bear case for Bitcoin is if the problem of saving your financial energy in your money is not there anymore. Most people go to Bitcoin because they want to save their financial energy, and that's where this is the big problem that most people face, and that's why they come to the solution Bitcoin. If the problem isn't there anymore, and your euro is going up in purchasing power every year, and we don't have massive inflation, and your Turkish lira and your US dollar is going up in purchasing power every year, then why we need Bitcoin? Of course, there are also the freedom aspect of it, because there's a bank that can censor your transaction and all those things. But then it probably would be more of a niche tool for people, for freedom fighters. I would still use it. I probably will still use it for Bitcoin. Is if all the world is all of a sudden fiscally responsible, and I can tell you one thing. That's a pretty safe bet to bet against that. If you actually see the numbers, it's just at that point it's just not possible anymore. They have to ruin their own currency, and this will just go on in the long run. So I think that's thing. What you also
Yeah.
talked about is what else could go wrong in Bitcoin. What is there? And there is always a risk in everything with a black swan event. Like there can always come down an alien superpower that has superior money and is enslaving humankind. Like those things are always in play, I guess. But all the things that I can think of why Bitcoin would stop working or why Bitcoin isn't sound money anymore are so outlandish that I wouldn't even think about that for saving that. Also, the argument, oh, like Bitcoin is a digital thing. What if electricity isn't there? Yeah, like if we from now to like tomorrow all lose all electricity tomorrow, then and that for a very extended period of time, for like a week or something, and there are books about that, what happens then, your smallest problem is Bitcoin. Your smallest problems is financial things. Maybe a big farm, maybe a lot of a big family that can help you defend the land, and maybe animals and the farms. So, if you want to prepare for that, you you don't buy gold for that. Buy a gun, buy a farm for that. That's way better for that. So the all the negative things for Bitcoin are kind of not in play for me, honestly. So that's how I.
Obviously an unfinished thought. I think ever since custodial, like banks as custodies, has is becoming a thing now. Do another one of those like gold reserve type of things where it's like, okay, well, we printed more paper money against Bitcoin, so that way it's like, okay, well, you can continue to then um, devalue it, I suppose. But let's see how the future unfolds. In a way, that's already happening because as they just print more regular currency, it's denominated or it's being considered to be denominated in Bitcoin, and that's one of the factors why the price is driving up. But just something that I'm still thinking through. The opposite of that, Robin, that you're looking forward to in um, I want to say like the utopian state. So like, okay, what's the idea? If you had to describe the ideal state where Bitcoin.
I just want to quickly address the thought of yours. That this is something I think and speak also a lot about with people, because paper Bitcoin is the same as paper gold. It's just not the same. So when more and more ETFs acquire more and more Bitcoin, and they already have over 1 million Bitcoin, which is not that much in the greater sphere thing, because there are like 21 million Bitcoin, and most are kept in self custody with people and not with institutions. So that is not something that really concerns me. But anyways, it's something that we should look out for. It's something that we should be aware of when we talk about Bitcoin, and that's something that we really should just be aware of. And I think the game theory of that will play out in the right sphere. If someone is actually cheating, is actually doing something, we had that with FTX. They will fail at some point. At some point, the calculations won't match up. At some point, one player that plays with them will keep them accountable. And the great thing is with blockchain, we have it verified, we have it public, and proof of reserves might be a real thing in the future, where where we don't trust any institutions that doesn't prove that they actually have the reserves they're saying. So I'm looking forward to that. But your actual question was, how to what do I look forward towards? And that's quite simple. You said it, how less people actually know about Bitcoin. That's what I look forward to. The 99% of the people figuring out what Bitcoin actually is, and figuring out what this can do good for the world, and the positive impacts that Bitcoin will have on the world, with higher quality products, with a lower time preference, with all those amazing things that Bitcoin will bring to our world in no time. So that's something I'm really looking forward to, the positive side of things. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to the positive Bitcoin world, and the 99% of the world that doesn't have it right now figuring it out,
Mhm.
or more realistically, the 10 or rest of the 80% blindly following, because they are kind of game theoried and group pressured into Bitcoin at that point.
Yeah, and that's I guess like would you that's probably like the long-term goal. What's something that is in the more short term now that has you like almost glued to the screen? Like, okay, like I really need to see how this plays out.
There's nothing really short term that really excites me about Bitcoin.
Hmm.
Obviously, the next 18 months should be the best months in this bull cycle. So the price will probably rip and will be really good. And then we have all those. Newbies coming into Bitcoin and asking a question, and then you can really guide them towards the Bitcoin process. And hopefully, we can make. I also saw that BlackRock presentation that was amazing they did where they actually showed the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, where they showed like Bitcoin, that's risk off and Ethereum is risk on. I love that BlackRock is making advertisement for that because they're just such a big player and they are making now the advertisement for Bitcoin is not crypto. It's not just those. We as small players now we pressured the big BlackRock guys into saying the same thing. They are saying it in a different language, but basically they are saying the same thing. And I think that's a great accomplishment of the Bitcoin community. And with that being said, with the Bitcoin ETFs, with nation states now in there, with so many publicly traded companies in there, with that bull run now really coming into play, with the ETF playing in with all those inflows, I thought, oh, so great for Bitcoiners. But again, I'm in there anyways for the next 10 years. Not in Bitcoin, but really in the Bitcoin community for next 10 years, deeply involved with the daily Bitcoin podcast. So if it happens next year, I'm fine. If it happens in 3 years, I'm fine. So I'm just looking. But I think the next 12 months could be really exciting for Bitcoin.
Absolutely. I was gonna ask, this was gonna be my last question to you, but I just thought of a more interesting way of asking it. I was gonna ask like, okay, any parting thoughts, but recently I came across this post on X where someone said, okay, you are in an elevator with Michael Saylor. What do you say? And so, or it was either Michael Saylor or Satoshi Nakamoto. I can't remember what the post was, but I figured I'd spin the question to you. You're in an elevator with a stranger. You've never met them. What are you telling them?
Yeah, it's interesting because Michael Saylor, I think, even responded to that tweet, and because I think the tweet that I saw is like, "Oh, Michael Saylor, you're in a elevator with Michael Saylor, and you have a minute. What do you say to him?" And Michael Saylor responded, "Buy Bitcoin" or something like that. I think it's hilarious that Michael Saylor actually responded. Yeah, really cool. In an elevator, usually I'm not that extrovert of a guy. If I'm in an elevator with a stranger, I usually smile nice to him and don't say anything. So that's usually my way. But if I were to go on and I usually don't lead with Bitcoin, to be honest. Like if I'm at a party, because everyone at someone at my circle knows that I'm a Bitcoiner, and if I'm speaking with someone else that is completely new to me, I usually just ask questions. That's what I really love to do. I just like ask questions. Hey, what is he really excited about? I mean, this has nothing to do with Bitcoin again, but when I go into a conversation, what is he better in than I? Like what is his biggest skill, what is his passion, what is one thing that he is way better in than I am. And that's I'm I would not say that I'm an introvert, but I'm not the guy that speaks to random strangers in an elevator. But that's what I do when I'm in a private party and come across a new person. I just ask them questions, the same thing that I'm doing on the podcast. And that's where I feel really comfortable finding out new things about a person. That's where I learn something. That's where I grow. And that's I'm really humbled that you invited me on the podcast, and then that you even thought about me inviting me, and I'm so grateful for that. And I'm I like more to being the host and being the one that asks the questions. But yeah, thank you so much for inviting me today here. And I'm getting more and more used to being also the guest on podcast episodes. By the way, for everyone that's listening to this, I have actually on my YouTube channel a playlist set up where I feature all the interviews that I have been on that are available on YouTube. So there's like all the other channels, because I don't want to upload them on my channel, because that's not something my subscribers subscribe to. But I want to give like some ad space to that, so people can find out my story a little bit more.
Robin, thank you so much for, of course, being open to the idea of even having this conversation with me, or I should say, conversation with me. Honestly, as I was consuming your YouTube content, I'm like, okay, I really want to know what he's learning from everyone, and so I figured this would be an interesting conversation to just discuss Bitcoin and help support your cause of bringing more and more people, into the Bitcoin ecosystem. So I definitely want to thank you for that, and I appreciate you for taking the time. With that, I do want to say if anyone wants to jump on stage, feel free to request. We have a few more minutes with Robin before he has to drop. If not, then we can end it here. I'll just give give anyone a couple of seconds to raise your hand if you want to opt in to be a speaker.
And I think we have a question also in that thing where someone asked me, dealing with sponsors that pay only in Bitcoin, how do you deal in Austria with your expenses? So just by the way, I actually asked sponsors to pay me in Bitcoin. So every sponsor of them also is offering to just pay me in euros and in the fiat rails. But especially with sponsors that are across the ocean and in America or something like that, like Coin Vigilante, it's really complicated to do a fiat transaction. It's like you need routing numbers and banking numbers. Get that from the bank. To be honest, I never did that. And then I was telling him, let's just do it in Bitcoin. And it was a Sunday evening, and I did it, and it was really cool. So I don't like the sponsors don't force me to take Bitcoin, but I really like to take Bitcoin. It's just a way better way to stack Bitcoin, because it's directly from there into my Bitcoin solution, in my self custody solution, and that's something that I really like doing. And they're like Seprite I use. You just send them a payment link, they get like the QR code, and then it goes directly in your wallet. It's an amazing experience. But to the question that he had about paying in uh, uh, Bitcoin, I don't take a loan against my Bitcoin, and I will run maybe in that. I right now don't have that problem till now, because I can pay my my bills, my fiat bills in a lot of things. A lot of my revenue comes in the fiat rails. For example, YouTube ad revenue. I probably will not convince Google to pay me in Bitcoin. That will not happen anytime soon. And some other sources where like it just comes in fiat, and it will always come in fiat for the next like 5 years probably. And I hope I can pay all the fiat bills with that. And the sponsor is just like something above that. But I might have to sell some Bitcoin at the starting of the year, where the tax bills are coming in, and I have to pay taxes and something like that. So, or maybe the expenses are rising faster than my fiat payments. So yeah, that are some things that I'm aware of. But right now, I didn't had to just like sell some Bitcoin, do it straight, play around with leverage. But maybe I change my opinion on that. There are great products out there. There are actually some companies that offer exactly that, because more and more people want it. But I'm very skeptical of that being really mainstream. But maybe it will be. It's an open field, and I'm willing to learn about that. Right now, I would, if I right now would have to pay a big fiat bill, I would just sell some of my Bitcoin.
All right, so you're You're all in it, man. That's awesome. Um, Robin, thank you so much. Everyone else, thank you for taking the time to listen to this conversation, and hopefully we get a chance to do more of these in the future. Thanks, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so
Take
much
care.
for taking me on. It was a pleasure. Also amazing to see so many people here. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.